Thanks a lot. I think today we have a wonderful leader with us, Saurabh Srivastava. He has a great name in the industry, starting from strategy, architecture, AI, data, and whatnot. So let's welcome Saurabh for the podcast, Visionary Leaders with Sandeep Bhalekar. So thanks a lot for being on the podcast. Saurabh would like to just give us, our viewers, what you have done so far, your journey, starting from your uni days to now, so that we have the complete background.
Sure, Sandeep. First of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And as far as my journey is concerned, right from the college days, I have been doing it was my passion, mathematics. I was very much interested into mathematics that led me into data and AI. So means nowadays we hear about AI, but I have been doing this for last 23 years, especially writing the mathematical equations and then putting C++ on top of it. So that was my beginning. So that was the beginning. That's where I started. And I worked in US for medical devices companies, for Microsoft Consulting Services. I worked in India. I had my own startup. And last 6 years, I've been in Melbourne. So I visited here for a consulting assignment, and I found this place very interesting. And it was kind of, I thought, okay, why not move to Australia with a family? So it's been like 23 years I was moving around the globe, US and Europe and India, and then now finally I'm settled in Melbourne. And I hope I stay here in Melbourne for rest of my life. So from the architecture and strategy perspective, if I go back 23 years, uh, I would have served more than like 200 customers. And I would say Fortune 500 companies when we name it. Initially, when I was kind of working with the Microsoft Consulting Services, it was I was handling top 50 customers in the finance, like JP Morgan Chase and Countrywide Financials, which is part of Bank of America now. And similarly, one of the largest utility companies in UK, United Utilities. And so if I look at the domain wise, it is utility, higher education, and some of the finance in the beginning of my career. So yeah, and from the startup side, I did two or three startups as well. Means some of them were successful. I and it was not IT. It was completely into utility, like lake node substations. So I did that as well. It was interesting, but due to some reasons, I thought to kind of exit from that business and do something in the field of healthcare, which I'm still doing as a part-time, building some sort of a scalable AI system for healthcare AI researchers, because there is a big gap in drug repurposing space. So that's kind of a problem statement which I'm trying to solve currently.
No, perfect. I think this is the perfect time, Saurabh, to understand more about the roles we have played, but most importantly, the technology, right? So we talk about technology. We are talking about strategies, how to adopt the newer technologies, emerging technologies. So what is that, your roles, like, so far you have done, where you had to adopt new technologies, what impact it had, and probably the viewers will understand how to do it in a better way.
Yeah, so right from the beginning, one of the things that I kind of not push, but from the architecture as well as the strategy perspective. So every industry is different. So when I look at finance, when I look at higher education, when I look at utility, the adoption curve is very different. So when I kind of, as a consultant, when I walk in, the first thing I look at their industry structure, means where do they sit in the industry, what others are doing in the industry, right? And how useful is that technology is, because these days, every other company is trying to become an AI company. And that's where there is and it's a good aspiration, but at the same time, there are certain risks as well. So my role as a person who is in the field of strategy and architecture, from the role perspective, you can say enterprise architect or principal enterprise architect, means it's very important to understand what is their business strategy, and then the regular stuff, which is kind of, if you look at any framework, aligning with that, which is very common, but there are certain exceptions from the governance and risk perspective, which are very important, because it's as a human beings, for us means the moment we see a risk element, we kind of step back and we feel a fear factor. So the most important thing is, yes, there is a risk, but how do we kind of get around that risk? How do we circumvent that risk? And there will be risk on the next steps as well, because risk is not static, it's very dynamic in nature. So the risks which are static, it's easy to find out. Risks which are dynamic, that's where the complexity kicks in, and that's where the governance plays an important role. And there are two levels of governance. One is at the macro level, and one is at the micro level. Macro level governance is more like, okay, how we are doing in terms of alignment with the business goals. The micro level strategy is how we are implementing technology so that it is absorbed within that organization, and the technology adoption in terms of user acceptance means how technology is adopted by the user, consumed by the user, because that makes a huge difference. So there are two different types of governance, two different areas of a governance. One is very much kind of business aligned that we see from the enterprise architecture perspective, but the other one, which is more kind of risky because we are dealing with the nuts and bolts, that's where the problem comes in, because things looks fine from the 40,000 feet view perspective, but the moment we come to the ground level, it makes things a little bit bitter as well as not so smooth.
So world is going crazy with agentic AI frameworks now. What are your takes on that?
So agentic AI framework, it's from the framework perspective, like if we look at, so the word framework has come from actually physics. If we go back like 50, 60, 70 or 100 years back, in physics, in astronomy, we used to use framework because the problems were big. It was very hard to kind of figure out what is a generalized way of looking at something, or we needed a lens to look at something. So we created framework. Now, when we talk about agentic AI framework, means there are some good as well as there are some bad, both pros and cons, because most of the time what we are propagating is a one generic framework which is applicable to all industries, but that's not how it works. It's like we have a Panadol and we want to treat all sort of pain with a Panadol. Means that's the reason there are different types of medicines, and every medicine has got its own framework, right? And that's the key in terms of understanding the industry problem as well as the organization problem, because there are certain problems which exist at the industry level. So if I talk about higher education, if I talk about finance, if I talk about utility, so the problem exists in every other utility company. Can we solve that problem with that framework? The other thing is there is a problem A, it exists in company A, but some other company has solved it very well, maybe in US, maybe in Europe. Can we take that and then customize that framework and then implement in my organization? I think that's where the key is, because there are certain problems which exist across the board in the industry. It's very hard to solve from the mathematics or I would say complexity theory perspective. It's a hard problem. It's not easy to solve, and that's where a lot of times means I also propagate, especially at the times when people are or companies are kind of deciding the investments in different technologies. Thus keep those things in mind, because strategy is one piece. When we implement or execute that strategy, that's where the reality kicks in. And how do we manage the reality part of things so that our kind of balance sheets or budgets don't go, don't blow up? That's because that's what is happening a lot. 80%, 90% digital transformation failure. And it's just because the problem space is not very much kind of crystallized, that this is the very specific problem we want to solve, and this is how we want to solve it. So frameworks are great, but how do we tailor it in a way that makes sense for that specific industry? So this is how I kind of, so this is a hierarchy I take when I talk to my customers or C-suite. Industry structure, market structure, and market behavior. because everything is aligned with that. Any organization, they are actually either selling something, right? It's more of a demand and supply. So if I am sitting in Australia, if I am a finance company, my market structure and my market behavior is very different than a finance company who is doing business in US or in Europe or in India. So industry structure, market structure, and market behavior, that makes a huge difference. I can take the same framework and it will be implemented very differently in those three regions.
No, perfect. I think that's a perfect thought for getting into the rapid fire segment. So as a next segment, we are gonna go into rapid fire section. This segment is quite fun. So Saurabh, we are gonna ask you easy questions. We expect a punchy one liner or one sentence answers.
Sure.
So first question is like, what is the biggest myth about digital transformation in one sentence?
It's a tough question. It's a very tough question. There are many myths about digital transformation. That digital transformation is not about technology. It's about how we look at a business differently, and how do we, and I know it's three lines, but how do we place a business in the market dynamics where the demand and supply meets?
Okay, so next question is related to your career. So who is the best client or your most favorite client or organization you worked for?
I'm a fan of Microsoft, and I'm still a fan of Microsoft after 15 years. Yeah.
And who is the worst in all?
I haven't come across any worst organization. I would say my own startup, because there were things that we could not manage. So I would say, yeah, because it failed. So maybe that's why.
No, that's fine. So as a next step, like, one tool, framework, or methodology you can't live without.
One tool or framework.
Yeah, we have been talking about framework a lot today.
Yes.
But one tool which you can't live without. Is it ChatGPT, any AI, mobile, or?
I think if I there are many tools. Means it's again a very hard question because from architecture and engineering and strategy perspective, it's a box of toolkits.
Right.
And one I would say for enterprise architects, TOGAF. Though I push back TOGAF frameworks a lot, but I still say that I use it, but in a very different manner. So that's one thing that I always carry with myself, and the governance frameworks as well, which is COBIT, because without that it is not.
So TOGAF and COBIT.
Yeah.
Yeah, both. Yeah, perfect. So next question is related to technology. Cloud, AI, or analytics, which will disrupt the financial sector most in the next decade?
Data and AI, it has already started disruption. Yep.
Any like best book, podcast, or resource every architect should know?
Best book. There are many best books. What I call best is actually not from the architecture. It's from the other area. But which book should I? I would say. There are systems thinking. It's very important from the technology perspective, from the strategy perspective, as well as from the AI perspective.
Okay, so last question is very tricky. So if you could change one thing about the tech industry overnight, what would that be?
Wow. One thing I would like people to think more from the mathematical angle, because behind every technology or underneath every technology, it's mathematics that is actually working, and that's the inner engineering. So if we can go to the inner engineering and just tune nuts and bolts, the rest of the things which are lying on top of it should work fine.
Right. No, thanks a lot, Saurabh. So that was Saurabh Srivastava. Thanks a lot for being here, Saurabh. And looking forward to work with you more in this kind of podcast.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Again, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to your team as well. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a great
Saurabh.
day. Bye. Thank you.